Yes,
We're back.
sir. Welcome to another episode of the Blue Bloods College Game Time Podcast. I'm
I'm
Trey
Brandon
Smith.
Holmes. Welcome to Blue Bloods College Game Time podcast and YouTube channel for those of you who are streaming podcast and YouTube channel for the fans, by the fans, dropping fresh college sports content every day. Trey,
Every
let's just talk
day.
about. I know we always have an agenda, but let's just talk about how great our YouTube channel is doing right now. Shout out to the YouTube supporters, man, in the YouTubeverse. We thank you all who are streaming tonight. We've gotten some cool DMs this last week about just kind of our work and what we've been doing. It's been encouraging.
Yeah, it's been real encouraging, and we're continuing to grow, and we just appreciate the support. And whether you're someone that just sticks to one playlist, or you're someone that watches all of our content, or someone that watches the full episodes, whatever it is, we just appreciate you being here, and hopefully we can continue growing and putting out that college sports content for the fans, by the fans. Like from week one of this episode, that's what our mindset has been. We're just two fans. We're on here giving our takes, giving our perspective. We're not out here trying to be these experts and reporters and whatever else. We're just two fans, just like you listening or watching. So the Blue Bloods double dribble. So let's start there. We're in this weird place with college sports right now. We're in a situation where college football is over. The season is.
It's never
dies. But it's like we're in a whole new season right now with the transfer portal being on fire, which we're about to get to. The coaching carousel,
spring ball is
recruiting,
2 months away.
Signing day coming up, all of that stuff happening. But then also we're in the heart of conference play with college hoops, and we're about to hit that final stretch here in a month or so as we gear up going into March. And so we're continuing to play with our format as we sort of are in this transitional part of the season coming out of football. If you've listened with us from day one, you remember we used to have a pretty consistent format for each week of college football. It was bowl prediction, biggest surprise, biggest disappointment. And we're going to start kind of incorporating some of that back into the basketball side of things. But if the transfer portal keeps blowing up like it's been doing, and there's just so much going on, we can't not talk about it on a full episode. But let's start with basketball. Once again, like every week, we had a handful of upsets. I know you actually made a sidebar video, a bonus video about one of them. So go ahead and you start us off, and then I'll close us out with the different.
Yeah, man. I'm going to talk about these boys down in Lubbock, Texas, man. Well, not down west, wherever you're at. Lubbock, Texas. Mark Adams and the Texas Tech Red Raiders have been ballin'. 2 major upsets in 1 week, bro. What they do, Kansas, then they beat Baylor. But then what happens is, you said it last time we talked about them, right? You said, the thing I'm concerned about Texas Tech is, can they go these long stretches or these long droughts of not scoring points? And when is it going to catch up to them? And it did, man. It caught up to them. They lost to Kansas State on Saturday. They lost to Kansas State 62-51. But then here's the crazy part, and we'll probably dig some deeper into this, is number 1 Baylor lost again. So they lost early. Yeah. They lost early to Texas Tech in the week, and then they lost again to Oklahoma State. And it wasn't just a close loss. They lost 61-54. I mean, so that's for a very mediocre, in my opinion, mediocre Oklahoma. This isn't Oklahoma State with Cade Cunningham last year. And so, man, the Big 12, man, dare we saying, we were texting about it, are they like the SEC West of college basketball this year? I mean, if you're looking, man, they got a lot of solid teams in the Big 12, and I'm interested to see how this is going to divvy up. I still like, my personal opinion, I know you like Baylor. Some of that, I know you love Baylor. Your dad went to Baylor. You got family ties. So I don't know if some of that plays into your decision.
No, they're just really good.
I still like Texas Tech even when they don't score. I'm just blame it on me growing up in Detroit. Blame it on me growing up on the Bad Boys Pistons, where defense went. Yeah. The only titles we've seen in Detroit is not because we've had an explosive offense. We've had tough, gritty, hard-nosed, make you earn everything defense. And maybe that's why I have this love for Texas Tech. It just they're not as physical as the Bad Boys, and I mean, this is just 2 different eras, but they do play smothering defense, man. So I just have this crush on teams that play great defense. Because to me, it's what I grew. If you grew up playing basketball in Detroit, like that is Detroit's brand style of it. We're going to play tough, gritty. Any basketball player, any prep kid you see come out of Detroit, even to this day, they can score, but they're known for they're just relentless dogs on the defensive side of the basketball. So for me personally, I do like Texas Tech. I mean, I think they can hang with anybody. I'm not sure where they are with their leading scorer coming back from like the COVID protocols and all that. But I think this is not a team anybody wants to see come. I don't think anybody wants to see them come March, personally.
Yeah, obviously with Baylor, for me, the thing that, if anything hinders them from duplicating what they were able to do last year, it's that their guard play isn't the same. But the length they have combined with the skill set, the skill set they have, I still give them the upper hand because they also play incredible defense as well. I mean, Baylor will guard. They'll sit down on you. They'll guard you. They also have a matchup zone they can throw at you that's very unique, and they've got the length to make it, like, really execute it well. Here's the thing with college basketball. I think a team like Baylor, someone like Scott Drew, he's going, okay, we had a bad week. Somewhere deep down, he's going, we needed that bad week. We needed that to refocus ourselves for the last half of the season. And then you'll see it again where sometimes entering into the conference tournaments, there will be coaches that they're like, we're already in. We're already going to be one of the top seeds, and they'll lose like in the first or second round. I'm not saying they throw the game, but it's not like it's just this heartbreaking, devastating loss. They're going, well, no, I'm going to rest up the rest of this weekend and get ready for the tournament. Texas Tech actually did that the year they went to the national championship, where I think they lost in the first round of the Big 12 tournament that year, and they were one of the top seeds. If they weren't number one, they were in the top 2 or 3. Lost in the first round, rested up, and then went on a run that almost won it all. And so I think you'll see teams that will have weeks like this. And here's where it kind of separates the men from the boys, because some teams use a week like this to reset, refocus, and then they end up having a great back half of their season. And then other teams kind of self-implode. It's like they've gotten to this point in the season where now it's, okay, is what we've seen this whole time fool's gold, or is this team the real deal? In other words, are they now being exposed and we're about to see them, the wheels kind of fall off as the season progresses, or are they going to use this as an opportunity to reset? And a team that I've kind of got my eye on right now is USC. Okay, they were the number 5 team in the country, and they lost twice last week. So that's 2 top 5 teams that lost twice in 1 week. And I'm curious, I haven't watched a lot of them, but I do remember, gosh, I guess at this point, it's 5, 6 years ago, with the UCLA team with Lonzo Ball, where they still won like 30-something games. But, I mean, they raced out to win in like
incredible run in the beginning,
a ridiculous amount of games. And then they lost one, I think, maybe to Oregon. And then they kind of just stumbled into the Pac-12 tournament. And then they ended up losing, I think, getting knocked off by like Kentucky, and what was just a awful game to watch. I mean, that team got to a point where they were literally just playing on pure talent. They wouldn't guard anyone. Steve Alford was the coach of the team at the time. They switched to a 3-2 defense, and they wouldn't even play that hard. Like, it was just, they became a team that was the most exciting team to watch in all of basketball, in my opinion, to start that season, getting it out, running the break, playing up and down, running the floor, to where then they became this team that's like, they couldn't guard anybody. They couldn't play in the half court. That seemed like teams kind of started figuring them out. And then they weren't even fun to watch. And so a team like USC right now, I'm wondering, I feel confident in Baylor because Baylor's been here before. I mean, they've been to the top of the mountain now. They've had one of the top teams in all of college basketball. They've had a bad week and shown that they can rebound. I think Scott Drew probably on some level is going, I'm glad we had that. We needed that. We needed a reminder that we still have to work hard and stuff to do the things that, we've built this program on if we want to keep winning. But a team like USC, I'm not so sure. I mean, they had a great run last year. Andy Enfield, we've talked about him on this podcast before, their head coach. He's done a great job building that program, but they're just now getting here in the last couple of years where they've been like one of these top ranked programs. And so I'm just wondering. And I also don't trust the Pac-12, man.
Yeah.
I guess UCLA is winning me over, but in Arizona, even like they're trying to make a comeback. Some of these kind of basketball, blue blood type programs in the Pac-12. I don't know if I guess Arizona would be debatable, but UCLA for sure. They're starting to make a comeback, and I don't know. I just think that what was it a couple years ago? Washington won like a ton of games running that Syracuse zone, and then now they've kind of been figured out. There hasn't been a lot of sustainable success in the Pac-12 in recent years, and so now I'm wondering, okay, UCLA losing twice this week. Are the wheels about to fall off, or are they going to get it together? But keeping it moving, we also had number 24 Alabama get into the SEC. They fell to Mississippi State. Arkansas, the Razorbacks, baby, upset number 12 big LSU, win. And they did it with their assistant coach leading the way, Keith Smart. Eric Musselman was recovering from a surgery, so he wasn't even at the game. They went to Baton Rouge, beat LSU. Great game. I actually watched that one from start to finish, as I always do with the Razorbacks. And little guy by the name of JD Notae, man, he's been a difference maker on the offensive end for the Hogs. Obviously, he's still playing pretty good defense. He's getting steals. He's causing havoc. But I think what's happened with the Razorbacks that we're seeing is their chemistry is starting to get figured out. Musselman and his staff are starting to figure out which group of guys they need to have out on the floor. And it's crazy because our best lineup right now only has one guard out there in Notae. They just play so hard and they play together. And anyways, the best five, at least that have been starting, they come out and they make sure we don't have like a soft, bad start. And obviously it paid some dividends with LSU. And then LSU, I don't want to go on a tangent, but their coach, man, Will Wade, that guy wears me out. But the SEC, they're not going to have as much tournament representation as like what I believe the Big 12 will. Because even there, Kentucky and Tennessee, I mean, Kentucky beat the brakes off Tennessee. I'd have to look up the score, but it was not a 107 to 79. And yeah, man, that was an 18 versus 22 matchup. LSU just beat Kentucky a couple weeks ago. Now Arkansas is beating LSU. So the SEC is a conference as well where I think any team could win on any given week. Except for maybe a couple there at the very bottom. Another good Big 12 game we had. Iowa State knocked off Texas. Your boys. I say knocked off. I mean, they were ranked higher. But that's two more ranked teams in the Big 12 that you just can't overlook as the season plays out. We haven't even really gotten into the ACC, you know, with the Dukes and the Carolinas. I don't even know what's going on with Carolina. I know Duke's a top 10 team, and they took care of North Carolina State. What's going on in the ACC?
Why you look that up, man? The Big Ten had an interesting week. Michigan State, I love when they lose. It just makes me feel so good. Well, because they really, man, we got claimed that we ducked them because Michigan had to postpone due to COVID. Michigan's had a rough season. Coach Juwan Howard, man, they've had a rough season this year. A lot of COVID. We got a transfer guard in that just didn't really fit, you know. And it's hard to nail. Like, it looks good. He was going to get drafted, but decided to come back, and because of what Coach Howard just did with the last two guys that transferred in, and it just. You know, that's the thing with transfer portals, hit or miss. But so yeah, Michigan State was really trolling us, saying like, "Oh man, we opted out to not get beat," and then they go and they lose to Northwestern. They're top. Michigan State's a top 10 team. They lose to Northwestern, but man, the Big Ten, man, they're strong this year. You got Illinois that's ranked. You got Wisconsin. You got State. You got Ohio State. You got Purdue. I mean, that's It's a tough. I think, you know, obviously I don't think they're on the elite level of the Big 12 as far as play that's going on, but I think the Big 12 and the Big 10 will probably have the most representation across the board from, you know, the major Power 5 conferences. But the team, man, that I've been watching a lot is Providence. Providence has been balling, man. I've taken some. They were supposed to play UConn this week, and it got postponed. But the Friars, man, they're 14-2. They're 14-2 this year. I think they're leading. Well, they're up there. They're competing for the number one spot. They're one game back behind Nova. They're one of those teams, man, that you kind of overlook because they don't have the big time name. They're not the UConn, they're not the Nova, they're not Marquette, they're not Xavier. But man, Providence, they're a top 25 team. They're number 21, and they've only lost 2 games. They play quality opponents. I think they're going to give a lot of people some. They're my. Can I throw this out early? They're my like future bracket buster. They're a team you need to keep your eye on. They play tough, gritty, good basketball, team basketball. Haven't sat down and watched a lot of full games, but I'll click on when I see that they're playing. And man, they've impressed me this year, especially the Big East is no slouch. I mean, you're going to get some good basketball there between UConn, Marquette, Xavier, Villanova, Seton Hall, DePaul, Butler, like Georgetown. It's a good conference for basketball, man. That's no slouch. So that's kind of my future bracket buster that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. We'll see if they'll garner more respect going into March.
Well, and Coach
Cooley, he almost came to Michigan, man.
He's been there for really, he's been there, I think, over a decade. They're a well-coached team. But since you brought up the Big East, there was a big upset in the Big East with Marquette knocking off Seton Hall, who was ranked, I think, 20th. Seton Hall was the number 20 team, got knocked off by Marquette. Marquette's kind of my team to keep an eye on. They're not ranked. They're somewhere in like kind of that top 4 or 5 of the Big East right now. But I've said it before, with Shaka Smart being there, being able to instill his style of basketball that I don't believe he ever really had a chance to deploy when he was at Texas. But what we remember from him at VCU with the Havoc style, I think we're going to see more of that come to life down here in the final stretch of the season. So Marquette's actually one of my teams to keep an eye on, ironically, to your point, coming out of the Big East as well. And yeah, I mean, it's kind of an underrated conference right now, but they're playing some hoops out there, man. Obviously they had to kind of regroup after the big split when they lost Louisville, Syracuse, lost a handful of others from the big to the ACC, or who ultimately ended up in the ACC, which we hadn't really talked about because I'm looking at them going, really all they have right now is Duke, I think. I mean, Carolina, I don't know what's happening with some of the blue bloods over there in the ACC. Even Florida State, not that they're a blue blood basketball program, but they've been really good in recent years. But anyways, that's kind of our blue blood double dribble. Had some upsets. We'll continue to have some as the season plays on, and we'll bring you all that action. But B. Holmes, let's get to the number one thing I believe on most people's minds, which is the transfer portal. I mean, this thing has been on fire. Tell me here's just my quick take. I've got a lot to say about this, but off the cuff as a fan, it's like a love-hate relationship, right? You hate it one week because you feel like there was just this mass exodus from your program, and then you turn around the next week and you're like, oh no, I'm in love with the transfer portal. Look at what just happened. And for me personally, I'm speaking from experience as a Razorback fan, because just a week ago, we're losing secondary players, it seemed like by the minute, including 2 starters, one who was a captain. Both ended up going to LSU. And then now all of a sudden we turn around this week, sign a former 5-star linebacker transferring from Bama, sign a former 4-star corner transferring from LSU to add to the former 4-star defensive end that we already had transferred from LSU, to add to the 5-star receiver we had transferred from OU. So it's love-hate. What are your thoughts on this thing?
Now, I love it for the players' standpoint. It's hate for me because my team, Michigan's admission standards are way too high. So we don't really benefit from the transfer portal. Like, we don't go get the kid that's coming from Bama or LSU because of our transfer standards. It's like impossible to transfer into Michigan. Like, they make it super hard, which is one of the things from what I've been hearing from the people who I know who are semi-close to the Michigan situation, is something Harbaugh has really been pushing, is that admissions loosens their standards so that you can compete with the Bamas, the Georgias, the LSUs of the world. Because in the SEC, you guys trade players like they're Pokemon cards, man. It's like, oh man, and I'm not disqualifying how good those schools are. I think they're great academic institutions, but Michigan has this like elitism towards it. Michigan refers to themselves as the Harvard of the Midwest. Like, that's how they treat themselves. Academically, yes, they keep up, but they have to kind of get rid of this like stigma where, we want to do it right. And Those days are over. There's a new era of college football. But as far as the transfer portal in general, I think it's great. I think I love it. I love the one transfer rule. Do I think there needs to be? I don't know how you regulate it though. That's the
Right.
only thing. I don't know how you. But here's the thing: people only have been up in arms about it because of football and basketball. I was a track guy in college. You could transfer freely. There was no sit out. Like you just transferred, and you could run at the next institution the next year. It only mattered for big time money sports. So I, I love it. I think it's a great idea. I think there has to be some type of regulation. Maybe there's like a transfer period, like between this period and this period, you can decide to transfer. But even then, Trey, I don't think that stops it. Because if you create a period, a kid will just say, "Fine, if I can't put my name in the portal now, I'll just quit." They'll quit the program. Like there's always going to be a loophole. I don't know how you. I think it's good though. I think it's good for the sport. I think it's good for the kid, because and I've always had this argument. If the coach, until we put boundaries on coaches jumping ship and leaving and figure that out, then we shouldn't restrict kids for doing the same. So if they can figure out a way to do it for coaches, where kind of like the NFL, there's a no tampering rule. Like you can't tamper till the season's over. You can't even entertain it until the season's over. Then I'll understand, like, hey, you can't make a decision to leave your school until a season's over. Now, if you have an internal conversation, kind of thing like Kelly Bryant did, like Clemson, where he was just like, hey, I'm out. Like, if you're going to start Trevor Lawrence, there's no need to play me. I'll just sit the rest of the year. To me, that's okay. That's you and your coach coming to an agreement. But, like, I'm kind of like, man, just to drop out in the middle of the season, I don't really necessarily agree with that. Like, it's that fine line for me. I think you and I, we grew up in the same generation. Like we're enough old school. We respect it, but then we're part of this new movement of the new school. And so I still am a firm believer of like fighting for what you want. Like if you, now I get every situation is different in college and you don't know till you get there and things might not work out and the position coach, all that stuff matters. But I think there has to be some regulation, man. I just don't know how you regulate it. To even out some of that stuff. Because right now it just feels like it's the Wild Wild West.
It is. And I think with regulation, though, too, like there has to be, not to sound corny, but there has to be education. Like where it's different from coaches and players is that the players are still 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, where decisions that they're making could have big time impacts on the rest of their life. Even if it's not about the decision itself, it's about the habit or the sort of internal processing, the internal practice that's put into place that could have a negative impact down the line for them. Whereas these head coaches, I mean, whatever, they're grown. A lot of them have families, but they're grown men. They're big boys. They're adults that are well established in their life. And so I'm not as concerned about making sure that coaches go through the checklist and really make sure they make the right decision for themselves and for them. No, they're grown. Like they need to, if they're not already doing that on their own, like that's their fault. Whereas for these college kids, even though they are adults and they are young men or women or whatever sport we're talking about, I feel like with the portal being so wide open, let me say it this way. At least when you had the 1 year sit rule, it made you think about it a little bit longer. As a young man, as a young athlete, as a just a young person getting ready to make a potentially life-changing decision, this little thing they had in place. Now, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with the 1 year sit rule, but what I'm saying is with that rule being in place, it at least made the players have to think through, okay, is this really what I want to do? Right? Because you're not going to just make an emotional decision to go sit a year. You're going to make sure it really is what's best for you and what you want to do. And because as I think about the transfer portal, I mean, it's like life, and I might get on a preacher box here, but it's like we're all in a transfer portal of some sort. I mean, even in our everyday lives. And so with our everyday decisions, and what I mean by that is college athletes, I think, need to be educated on a proper way to process transferring. Now you can say, oh, well, that's up to the family. Well, some of them don't have that type of family support. And some of them, the ones that they probably don't need to be listening to are some of the ones that are the closest to them because of the motives that they have. Right? I mean, would you agree with that?
It's true.
I'm not saying that's the case for every single collegiate athlete. I'm saying, but that's the case for a lot of them. Everybody wants a piece of the pie. And so my thought is okay, can we just at least make sure that we're educating kids to at least ask these two questions? Okay. Number one, does your pursuit outweigh your retreat? Okay. That's a life lesson right there in and of itself. Is what I'm pursuing outweighing what I'm leaving? In other words, if all I'm motivated by is what I'm leaving, what I'm trying to get away from, then I'm always going to end up in a place, whether it's in college sports or in life, where I'm going to just end up in a place that I produce the same results here that I produced the last place I was at. Because it's never about what I'm pursuing towards. It's always about what I'm running away from. And that's what I say when I mean educating these young people not to just make these decisions either emotionally or either just exclusively about money. Because if it's always about, well, they're not paying me enough money here, or they're not playing me enough here, or I don't like this guy, or I don't like that guy, I don't like, it's always about what I'm trying to get away from. And it's never about what I'm trying to walk into. Well, then now I'm setting myself up to live a life where I just bounce from place to place, constantly producing the same results and never knowing why. And the only way that I escape it is to continue to leave. And so that's the one thing. So does your pursuit outweigh your retreat? I mean, think about it right now. As grown men, someone listening to this podcast or watching it live on YouTube, okay? You probably work a job, and let's just say you work a job right now that you don't like. If all you're focused on is leaving your job and quitting your job and looking for something else only so you can quit your job, whatever your next job is, I guarantee you this right here, whatever your next job is that allows you to quit the job you're currently in, at some point in time, it's going to produce the same situation that you're in right now, because you haven't really determined, okay, what am I pursuing? Like, what am I wanting to step into? So that's the first question. Does my pursuit outweigh my retreat? And then the second one is, what am I pursuing? So if I establish, okay, this decision is more about what I'm moving towards, not what I'm running away from. And I don't mean to like just harp on this, but even in interviewing, like in times in my life where I've worked in situations where I've been able to interview and hire staff, I always try to ask questions to see, okay, are they just running from a previous situation and this is their escape? Or are they actually wanting to pursue this opportunity that they're interviewing for? Because there is a difference. And it's a difference as someone who's hiring these people. It's a difference in what you're going to get. And then on the flip side, if you're in those shoes and you're my escape from what I'm trying to leave, well, what's to say that you're not going to all of a sudden want to be escaping here in the next 3 months or 2 months or 6 months or whatever? So anyway, so that's the first question. And then what am I pursuing? Because if I'm pursuing what's wrong, and wrong's probably not the best word to use here. I hate to use right or wrong because it's not about right or wrong. But if I'm pursuing something that ultimately is not good for me, then I'm going to leave something that probably is good for me.
Yeah.
You follow me? Whereas if what I'm pursuing is what's good for me, then maybe what I'm leaving is something that was not good for me. And so it's like, I just hope that these players are getting some sort of education, or maybe that's what needs to be implemented, as a quality type education where it's teaching young men, young women how to process through these life-changing decisions, where it's not just about money, or it's not just about trying to get out of a situation that's uncomfortable or whatever, but it really is about going, okay, I'm going to have these types of decisions my entire life. What's the proper way to process them so that I make sure that I do not just what's going to bring me a short-term fulfillment, but what ultimately is going to be in the best interest of me long-term. I mean, to even get to my statement, I was just saying like, you know, you pursue what's good you may end up leaving what was not good for you. Or I hate to use good, bad, or right, wrong, because it's not always about that. Not to get preachy, but like sometimes is it a good situation versus a best situation, not just a good situation versus a bad situation. But it's like, as a married man, if I choose to pursue after another woman, well, guess what? I'm going to end up retreating is my current wife. Well, it's not good for me. That's not what's best for me. Whereas you and I right now doing this podcast, like this is something we've decided we want to pursue. It started off as us recording a podcast with just audio back week 0 of August. Then that parlayed itself into a YouTube channel. Then that's parlayed itself into a relationship with Sports Illustrated. Then that's parlayed itself into us setting these goals where we go from 39 subscribers to, whatever we're at now, 1,500 or getting close to 1,500. Hey, if you're watching right now, hit subscribe. But getting close to 1,500. But point being is we've decided this is something that we believe is what's best for us. It's something that we've each went before God with and thought, okay, this is what we're supposed to do. And now, depending on how this journey plays out, the more and more we pursue this thing, it's probably going to create forks in the road where we detach ourselves or leave certain things that we're in now, right? And so I don't mean to just completely harp on it, but I think there's just some lessons as far as really asking the right questions before you make a decision to transfer. Does my pursuit outweigh my retreat? What am I pursuing? And then really educating young people to understand, college age people to understand the difference in adversity and toxicity.
No, that's good.
Just because something is showing you adversity doesn't mean it's a toxic environment that you need to leave. And I think sometimes with the transfer portal being this easy to access and get instant gratification out of, sometimes these players are leaving adversity that they actually need to stick it out through. Right? But they're associating adversity with, well, it's toxic. I just got to get out of here. Now, there are situations that probably are toxic or just at the end of the day,
they just don't fit.
Yes, aren't a good fit. And so absolutely do what you need to do. And so I'm talking the long way around and getting on this preacher box because I think the part of, for me, that I'm passionate about are just young people in general. Obviously, you and I, we come from a background of being youth pastors, right? I mean, like I remember having a youth ministry with, soon to be college athletes. And yes, they're grown. Yes, they're adults, but these are things that they don't always know. And they don't always know to think about that could end up having more of an impact on the future and long-term sustainability of their life than an NIL deal or, a new coach or a new, a starting position or whatever it is. And so I just think that those are some things that need to be brought into the equation as it pertains to educating and regulating, this wild, wild west we have with the transfer portal in college sports. But
I think it's interesting because there's so many nuances. Like, sometimes like you said, so I think there's just, and this is why it gets hard to regulate, right? Because it's broken up into like boxes of transfer portal. You got the kid, like you said, who doesn't want the adversity. They were promised the world. They've probably always been the best. And then they hit to, as my dad told me, hey, when you go to college, it's everybody who used to be the man on their team is now on one team. And you kind of, you become the low man on the totem pole again. And if you've never had to experience that, you start to think it's unfair. Coach isn't playing you. He promised you all these things. And it's like, no, you got to just have that dog. But then I think there's also, like you said, there's the part where it just doesn't fit. Like you recruit you commit somewhere, it looks good. You get there. I was thinking about like Malcolm when we did his interview. He's like, man, we didn't even see the locker room, and it's like he had to make a decision like, yo, was this really like a good fit for me? And then I think it's but then there's also the nuance of where you're no longer wanted. And that's like a real thing from college coaches where it's just like,
absolutely,
I know we recruited you. I know we signed you. Like a kid from Michigan, Andre Selden. I love the kid, 4-star kid. He's like 5'9" though. So he's really like probably 5'7". And everyone's like, why would you leave? And he's like, I didn't want to leave. It's just the coaches pretty much told me like your spot is no longer here. And so like that's a different nuance. And so that's why I think it gets hard for where do you regulate, because how do you do it? And I think that's the intricacies of college sports that like a lot of casual fans don't understand. I think I have a different perspective because I was a college athlete, because I have friends who were big time college athletes. There's so many like you said, there's just nuance. There is. I am completely against the kid who's a not against them. I don't agree with the kid that leaves based upon adversity. I think that's one thing. Oh God, I'm gonna sound old by saying this, but I don't care. I think that's one thing this generation needs more than ever is we've kind of pacified them into not having to face adversity. Like there's our kids who
Right.
come from nothing and they get it out the mud, and natural life
Mm-hmm.
circumstances has taught them adversity. But you know,
Mm-hmm.
listen, we used to youth pastor in Frisco, Texas. Not saying those kids don't have problems, but they're not getting it out the mud. It's and so when they
Mm-hmm.
face a little adversity, it's like, wait a minute. So I don't agree with that. But I do think the kid who gets somewhere and like I look at a guy like Caleb Williams, right? Now he's just good enough where this doesn't affect him as much. You go to OU,
Right.
because you go to OU to play for Lincoln Riley. That's why you're there. There's no other questions about it. And then the nuance is Lincoln leaves, and you're like, and I'm sure he sat down with Venables. I'm sure he sat down and heard him out. His camp said they did. And you're like, this just isn't a fit. Like, no shade to Levy, no
Mm-hmm.
shade to anybody. This just isn't a. I agree with that. Okay, you go do what's because you are the type of kid, and I think this is where it is interesting with the portal. You can identify kids pretty early on now that have league potential.
Mm-hmm.
So like a Caleb Williams situation, I understand because I'm like, he's going to get drafted no matter where he lands. He's going to get a shot at the NFL. I'm okay with him saying, let me go figure out my options that put me in the best position to succeed in the NFL because he's that good. And then it's also the one where you have the kid who's just like, and this is where I wish college would be a little bit more honest about it. When instead of saying the kid is transferring, just say, hey man, we were going to rescind the offer. We got the scholarship.
Mm.
He's transferring. We came to an agreement, which really means the school told you we're gonna. Yeah, you
You
got.
need to
Hey,
go.
man, we're bringing in. We're bringing like, and I can only go about based on it. But I'm looking at the Michigan situation where we just lost 3 defensive backs. I know why. We just brought in 5 defensive
Yeah.
backs that were in the top 250 in the country. Hey,
Yeah.
man,
Right.
you're already low on the depth chart. We're bringing in these hot shot 4 or 5-star freshmen. You're probably not going to play, and we need to make room because we're actually got leeway on probably somebody else we want. So I think it's just I don't know how you regulate that though, Trey, because I think those are 3 separate situations, three different things that we know happen across the board every season. Um, so I'm for it in the sense that it gives kids opportunities, but I'm against it, like you said, in the sense of I don't like the kids that use it when they just face a little bit of adversity.
Well, and that's the thing for me is like, I don't even, now that we're like in this conversation, I'm almost now going, maybe you don't regulate it. Maybe what you do is you let the kid have the power to make their own
Mm-hmm.
decisions. Just like you just said, the university has the opportunity to, they
Yep.
both made a commitment, right? The school made a commitment to the player made a commitment to the school. So if the school has the opportunity to go back on their commitment after that season or that semester
Yeah.
or whatever, I mean, or let's just call it what it is. I made a
You made a
semester commitment,
not a 4
not
year.
a 4-year commitment. And so for me is okay, both it's all is well, all is fair. Each college athlete can make their own decisions. I just think I'm more passionate about the long-term benefit for the kids, for the players. Not as athletes, like as humans, as men, as women, as people who can go on to become productive members of society and make a good living for themselves, not people who, well, if the football thing doesn't work out,
I've always said
it's
this
over.
though. I think it needs to. This is where the NCAA, I believe, can help. They'll never do it. I don't think they'll ever do this. No, not how we run college sports now. I think you make that scholarship. Let's be honest, your semester scholarship. You make it. I would a mandatory 2 years, unless the kid decides to opt out. If the kid still gets his power, if the kid says, "Hey, I'm gone. This isn't working for me," that's different. But I think if a kid signs, if you sign that kid to an athletic scholarship, you should at least, I would like, now, I mean, they maybe do honor it for a full year. I think you honor it for a full 2 years. Like, you have to honor that unless the kid decides he opts out and wants to transfer. Because right now, this is why I don't blame kids so much on a transfer portal, because they know the game. They know if you don't,
it could
this
easily
can happen to
happen to
me.
them.
If, you love me this month, but like you said, Arkansas has got a 5-star linebacker. What kid was paying the price for that kid to come in? What kid behind the scenes who was low on the depth charts, like, hey, buddy, like, we love you. Thank you for contributing to the team. Your scholarship's gone. So you got to find a new home in the next couple of weeks, because spring ball starts in 6 weeks. You have to find a new home in 6 weeks to hopefully find a place to play football. I think you change some of this. I think you bring some of the instant transfer down if a kid isn't always looking over their shoulder. If the university has to be held accountable to say, hey, if you sign this letter of intent, you're planning, we guarantee for 2 years we cannot cut you, unless it's disciplinary action, different things like that. But for 2 years, we are committing to you for 2. That at least gets you an associate's degree. After that 2, we can decide if we want to, hey, it's not working after these 2, we'll let you go. I think they have to go to a contract-based system. I think that's the only way that works.
So let me ask you this: you almost have to, be in order for this sort of college free agency to be in control. But so let me ask you this: what if a scholarship offer to a high school recruit is a 2-year commitment, like you're saying, right? That's basically what you're saying. Okay. A transfer portal situation goes back to a semester. So now, at least I'm not prevented from playing a year, but at least there is some level of, there's a layer of, I don't think accountability is the word, but there's a layer of, you better make sure this is what you want to do built in to go, okay, if I transfer out of here, I'm basically cashing in the 1.5 year guarantee I have left of this scholarship to take on basically what they operate under now, which is a semester to semester type deal. And so at least now there's a piece built in to make me go as a player, okay, is this really what's best for me?
I would do this for the transfer. I would make it a 1 year, because we got to hold coaches accountable too. So absolutely. Now if a coach knows, if I offer this kid in high school, because this is the other problem we're running into, they're throwing out offers that aren't committable. So now if you sign a kid, you have him for 2 years. He's in your 2-year plan. We know we have him. Yeah. And then if you bring in a transfer, I have this kid for a year. One, I think it makes coaches be a lot more responsible about how they recruit and who they recruit. They don't over-recruit anymore. And then, like Saban wins, so people don't really look at it, but Saban's the king of gray shirting. Like, if people don't understand what that is, it's like you over-recruit, you tell a kid, hey, technically you're on the team, but you can come in, you won't join till like the spring when the scholarship opens up. And it's a really weird, SEC schools have been doing it for forever. Saban is like the king of it.
Oh, Arkansas benefited from it. I think that's how we got Darius Philon, who is now playing for the Las Vegas Raiders. He's a defensive tackle, was supposed to go to Bama, and I think got gray shirted at like the 11th hour, and then he
came over. Yeah, so I think if you do that, it makes, because I think that's, when you look at the portal, you also have to look at the coaches and you have to look at the landscape of recruiting. I think it's always going to be crazy because college recruiting is college recruiting. But I think that kind of puts some barometers and some barriers on it where now, one, you have to be better. And I think coaches have to be better with the athletes. But then, like you said, it makes the athlete think. Like, if I'm a high school kid now, and I know of like, okay, I do have the free transfer rule, but I would make it a little harder. Like, I would go back. Because this is why I'm also not against the sitting out the year rule if you go to a contract base, but you still get to retain that year of eligibility. So what happened before, you remember you transferred, you lost that year. So if you left after your freshman year, you lost your sophomore year technically. And then you got your junior, senior, you had 2 years in the school, could decide if they wanted to give you that last year. It's technically used as a redshirt year. But I think if you go back to that with the transfer, so that way everybody's more responsible. A kid knows you got 2 years here, so you don't have to look over your shoulder. But just know, if you choose to opt out of this, there will be another year sit out. You have to sit out. holds kids responsible, holds coaches responsible, and then if you do transfer, they do guarantee you that year.
And then what if a prerequisite to entering the transfer portal was completing a sort of counseling / coaching requirement? Yeah. Not something where I sit at a computer with some white-haired,
right.
Completely disconnected from my generation, suit and tie wearing guy telling me about why transferring this. No, I'm saying like a true
compliance person,
counseling, coaching, like send me to sit down with a guy and like, let's talk through this. Let's make some lists here. Like let's have a practical coaching process of really determining, is like this what's coach. Best? And then not the character coach, something where you really have to go through a process to go, okay. And then if at the end of the process, you still like your mind's just already made up, at least though, if you know it's not what you need to be doing, like you at least had to acknowledge that. Like you had to like confront that internally. Not that you would say that, but you know what I mean? Like really takes, because I'm telling you, B. Holmes, there are so many former college athletes who had the talent to play in the NFL. And even if they didn't, if they could have at least found a niche to study while they were in college, could have gone on to be a productive member of society that are now, I don't want to like throw certain jobs out there and just like it's demeaning, sort of step on certain people. But like, I'm telling you right now, and I know of some people personally who are not living the life right now that they want to be living. And it all goes back to a decision that they made their freshman year of college. Their freshman year of college, when they were redshirted and had never had to ever practice their whole life without playing games, didn't know how to handle it, transferred out.
You like that.
And so could we get someone, like, could we invest into that element? And I get it. I know you, like each program, they have like their recruiting coordinators and they have these coaches and they have all that stuff. But I'm saying someone who's not biased to the university, like a non-biased party that knows how to communicate and connect with athletes and connect not just with people, who can connect with young people. And really, it has nothing to do with athletics, but it's all about going through a decision-making process. Because when you're at college age, you know just as well as I do, like you really haven't gone through any of that type of training unless you were in a household that really, really emphasized it. And even if you're in a household that really, really emphasized it, a lot of times by the time you're old enough to really retain what they're trying to tell you, a lot of times you're going, I'm not listening to you. I got to go figure this out on my own. And so sometimes the best voice of reason you can have is a non-biased outside third party that comes in, shows a genuine interest in you, and their only motivation and their only agenda is to help you make the best decision for yourself. And maybe that is in place and I'm just unaware of it, but like, that would be a good thing for, in my opinion, the NCAA to invest in. If you're not going to regulate it, okay, let's educate it. Like let's now it would take a lot of manpower because of how many, but no, make it you have to complete this process. And it not be just some like defensive driving where you just sit there and let the video run and then click next, and then answer the, no, I'm saying like a genuine, like, I think that's what I'm passionate about. I'm sorry. Let me just get this last thing. I think what I'm passionate about with this is I actually am not bothered when kids transfer, right? Like they've earned the right to make that decision. So whether they made it emotionally, whether they thought it through, like a kid transferring, like that is their decision to make. What bothers me is when I see these kids make these decisions that were obviously influenced by the wrong voices. And then they end up stepping into a situation where they think the grass is going to be greener or they think the money's going to be greener. And it ultimately ends up being devastating, not just to their playing career, but to their life. And that's what I think we miss is when we don't put enough emphasis on a young person making a life-changing decision and really coaching them through that process. it can have lifelong detrimental impacts. And that's what I think I'm more than, oh, they're a quitter, they're quitting on. No, look, it's more about what are they learning in that process? What pattern are they establishing? And how is that going to impact them later on in life? And a part of why I'm passionate about it is because, like I just said, I know people
exactly.
like personally who could be living a totally different life right now had they had that intervention when they were in college.
Absolutely. I think they're trying to get there. Like, shout out to Ryan Day, head coach of Ohio State, bring in like a mental specialist that his kids can talk to. That I thought that was I hate Ohio State, but I thought that was worth celebrating, man, to bring in a mental health counselor that his kids can talk to and navigate that. And I think that's going to kind of shout out to this new generation of kids really pushing mental health and really being open and honest and talking about it. And really speaking, I give Gen Z that they're very honest about what their needs are. So I could see that becoming within the next decade some type of regulation within athletic departments, especially the departments that could afford it, that are bringing in hundreds of millions of dollars, of having some type of mental health coach / life coach. There's a guy that does it for Florida State, for Bama. I forget his name. He has a book. He's super great. Like, I've sat in a seminar of his. I can't think of his name. But that's starting to become a thing. So I'm interested to see how this kind of plays out and if more athletic departments will get behind that and saying, this is the person who's on staff. They're not even sports fans per se. We don't even know if they like sports. They're just here to help you make a better life decision, like you said, in a better mental space to make that type of decision.
And someone, maybe even if they're with the university, they're not associated with with the program, to a point where the head coach can't go say, hey, if this kid leaves, you're out. You know what I mean? Where then you can't start muddying the waters, where then now I'm trying to guide a kid with an ulterior motive of keeping my job.
Yeah, no, you just need this person to be completely detached, essentially. They need to be outsourced, essentially. It's like, so what we do, like, I work for a church. Well, we don't offer counseling at our church for whatever reasons we do. We have reasons why we don't, but we outsource it. So now it's like, hey, this is the organization we trust. We love them. We think they're great. They'll guide you in the right direction. Here's who you call them. Tell them we sent you. They'll connect you. I think
maybe that's our next venture, B. Holmes. Maybe that's what we're.
Man, and we both have dealt with college athletes over our career. That's something like I'm very big in, man. I think these kids need it, man, because I think about the decision. For me, the decision to transfer out of ORU, I'll always look back at that and how different my life would have looked if I would have went back. It took me years to get over what I gave up deciding to transfer out. And obviously my life turned out well. I have a great life. I have a great career. But I've always, me and my coach have kept in contact over years. And I remember having a conversation with him, like, after 4 years after I transferred out. It's like right after my father passed away. And he's like, man, I was so sad when you left. He's like, you had Olympic potential. Like, I'm not saying you would have made it, but you had Olympic potential. Like, it was inside of you. And I've always thought about that. Like, if I never would have left ORU, would I have at least made the shot? Would I have had the shot to go after it? Would I, obviously, everything has to play in the right way for you to make those moments happen in your athletic career. But I've always thought that, like, man, if I would have just kind of like, and I'll just be completely transparent. I had a horrible freshman year academically. So they were like, hey, you got to sit. And I was like, and so, I ended up going, doing the military thing and all that. And I always look back, like, if I would have just kind of like swallowed my pride in that moment, went back, had the conversation with my parents, I'm not doing this military thing. I'm going to go get this out the mud because this is what I want to do. Go back, suck it up, live through the embarrassment. Why aren't you running this year? Because I did bad academically. I'm going to get my grades back up. I'm going to still train with the team, and I'll be back in the spring to compete. I always think about what that would have did for me mentally as an athlete and what I may have accomplished, because now it would have meant more. Because I didn't run. I would have been like, no, I faced this giant head on. I attacked it. I fixed the problem. I went and got it. I've always wondered how different my track career would have looked. Obviously, maybe you could get hurt, maybe all these things. But I'm saying, in the perfect world, if I don't get hurt in that situation, I at least go pro for a couple years, without a doubt. Without a doubt, I go pro for a couple years. Not saying I would have made the Olympics, but I would have had a shot at going professional. But I have to live with that. I've had to live with that since I was 19 years old. And so I've actually never really like shared that openly. But no, I agree. I completely agree with you. There has to be something that helps guide the kid do that, man.
Well, and then on the flip side, I'm coming from my vantage point where here I grow up, the namesake of my granddad being a 9-year NFL All-Pro player, played for arguably two of the greatest head coaches to ever coach the game of football. He played for Paul Brown and Tom Landry. Okay. He's in the NCAA Hall of Fame. His banner is hanging up somewhere at McLean Stadium in Waco. My dad went on, he had offers from everywhere in the Southwest Conference. He got hurt, played a year at Ouachita Baptist in Arkansas, and then he transferred to Baylor and played with Mike Singletary, was a part of their last conference championship team before the Bryles era. Okay. Played for Grant Taft, who's kind of considered a legendary coach in the Baylor circuits. And so I'm named after both of these guys, and I'm thinking, okay, this is what my path is. And it really wasn't until I got to like my senior year in high school and really freshman in college where I was like I can chart my own path. I started having some opportunities, doing some public speaking type stuff, started working as a pseudo youth pastor, my senior year in high school. I was like 16, 17 years old. And then next thing you know, I was having opportunities to speak at these conferences and kind of basically ended up living a life I would have never thought possible that was more tailored to my skill set. I mean, because look, I was a decent high school athlete, but I was nothing special. Right. You know what I mean? I wasn't like this great whatever. It's not like if anything, coaches wanted me around for the locker room because I was a good influence on all the best players. Right. You know what I mean? Like that was my biggest gift to any athletic team that I played on. And then the fact that I had to learn the ins and outs of the game, like basketball and football. Like if I wanted to play, I had to make sure I knew the playbook, or I had to make sure I understood how to rotate over and take a charge or do this on defense and communicate and things like that in basketball. And so part of not being a good player kind of helped my knowledge of the game. But the bottom line is how many kids continue to walk this path because they feel like they're in this shadow that they have to live up to. And a lot of times they get to this level in college, they want to hit the transfer portal because really deep down, they're like, man, I really need to take a couple years to develop. I wouldn't mind being a red shirt and then, playing third string for a couple years and really learning the ins and outs deep down. But then they feel this pressure to go transfer somewhere where they can play immediately because they feel like if they do what they feel is what's right in their gut, that they're going to be a disappointment to people. And that's what I had to deal with. That's what I had to come to grips with was no. I always thought by me choosing the path I chose, I always felt like I was a huge disappointment to people. And to your point, I mean, this isn't something I just go on record and share publicly with everybody. But the bottom line is I had to come to grips throughout my life, now as a dad and a husband and all those, you'd like to, hopefully you can get yourself to a point where you realize okay, it really wasn't everything I thought in my mind was the reality of me making that was actually not the truth at all. And in fact, in some cases, I earned more respect from the people I thought I was disappointing because I was willing to make the decision of what I knew was best and right for me. And I think you take both of those stories like you and I just shared, think of how many athletes right now are carrying the weight of the world on their shoulder in one of those situations.
It's even this, one of the kids, and you know him well. He played with my brother. Dude, he's doing so well. I'm so proud of him. The kid, we got to have him on the show, Ely. I remember we had a really interesting conversation. I remember he came and visited me, and he was in Philly, so we did lunch. And he said, man, I always meant to thank you. And I said, for what? He goes, man, you had a conversation with me when I was a senior in high school. He goes, I heard it, but it didn't hit me till I was a sophomore. And he was like, I'll never forget. I was in your kitchen. And, Ely had signed with SMU, and, man, I mean, the kid just had it. I mean, the kid's 6'6". He's God's gift to earth, man.
He was a monster
6'6", 245 in high school. I mean, you just can't. Ran like a gazelle. Just Ely had the NFL type approach. You just looked at him and you go, wouldn't shock me if the kid ends up playing on Sundays because he's that kid. And I remember the conversation. I was like, hey, man, I'm proud of you. Just know because I was like, everyone's like, you're going to go to the NFL and when you're 18, that's all you think. I said, man, just think there might be a day when you wake up and you don't want to do this anymore, and that's okay. It's going to feel, there might be a day when you wake up and you realize this is just a job, and you might make the decision you don't want this job to be your full-time life. And he's like, nah, I love the game. And I've heard that comment from so many. I love the game. It'll never. Yeah, and he told me this when we met, Trey. He goes, it was my sophomore year. I realized I'm good. I realized I had the size. I got friends that have gone to the league at this point. He goes, but man, I woke up one day and I was like, I don't want this to be my job anymore. He's like, it's just not that. He goes, and then luckily he had the camp around him that was like, but you're going to SMU. A SMU degree will get you into any door possible. And what he did was he leveraged that, got his degree, did his graduate year at Texas Southern, and got a master's degree for free. And so I think about there's kids in my situation, there's kids in your situation, and then there's kids like Ely's situation where you're like, hey, they need coaching as well. Like, hey, don't transfer. Like, play, do what you got to do.
How to navigate
do what you got to
this.
do. Yeah. Get a degree from SMU, from Baylor, from wherever, because this degree means something. I mean, it can get you into some doors. And then, hey, if you really want to get a master's and you got a free year, why don't you, go transfer? He went to Texas Southern. He's like, yeah, man, it was just like, hey, they had a good program in this. They're not a football powerhouse, but they had a good program and I got a free master's degree. And, and I know we're in this era where like degrees and stuff are looking different, but I'm like, I'm with you. There needs to be something in place to help every kid navigate this, because we know, like, what is it, like 1% of kids, 1.7% of kids go Division I. Even there's only 300 some odd dudes in the NFL, so like not everybody's going to go. So how do you leverage where you're at to make the right decisions? And that's the thing, like you said, I believe these athletes need. I had it in my father was just, my dad was such, helped me navigate even the stuff with ORU. And even then, he's like, man, I remember that. He's like, I kind of slipped on that. We should have handled that a little bit different. But I at least had somebody in my camp that was like, when I was transferred from ORU, and I'm like, yo, I want to go to LSU. And he was like, no. I remember he's like, let's go to Baylor. A Baylor degree goes a little bit further than an LSU degree. Trust me. And like, he was the one who kind of helped me navigate. If you are going to transfer, look at, what do you want to do with your life? Okay, let's look at these schools because of these programs. Right. Like you said, and I know we're kind of shooting a dead horse. Those type of people need to be in the athletic department to have that type of conversation, because this is the one question I ask any kid that comes to me about recruiting. If you weren't playing a sport, would you still go to school there? If you weren't playing a sport, would you still go to school there? Okay, if you're transferring, what do you want to do with your life? You want to be a dentist?
Yeah. If they didn't need a quarterback right now,
would you go? Would you go?
Would you go?
And what are you studying? Do they have a good program for that? It's just those.
And not that can't be part of why you go. Obviously, if there's opportunity there and it's a great fit for you. But that's the thing. There's so many layers to this onion, so to speak, that these players deserve to have someone at least like walk them through that without any type of agenda one way or the other. I don't know, man. Maybe we're on to something.
We just went on a huge tangent on
another. Yeah. Hey, we're not even going to do this last segment. I think we're going to save this segment, but I will tell you all listening or watching, we got a really cool, it's regarding the NFL playoffs. So shout out NFL playoffs. I know, we got the Rams and the Cardinals capping off the wild card weekend tonight, and we'll get to this next week. But it'll
be a fun.
It'll be a fun segment on the players in the NFL and kind of how it correlates back to college. But that was good conversation. I mean, that's how we want this to be. If you're still with us and you're watching right now, please hit subscribe. Obviously, I haven't looked at the comments, but if you're leaving comments, thank you so much. We'll respond to those. And if you haven't, like if you just heard that whole spiel we just went on regarding the transfer portal, let us know your thoughts. We're always going to give you our opinion and our just raw, uncut thought process on things. And it's I think you can tell with both me and B Holmes, whether sometimes we agree with each other, sometimes we don't, but like we're both very convicted and grounded in what we believe in. And I think where you and I, Brandon, like where we're always going to be on the same page is like, we want these young athletes to win at life. And whatever the best path for them to win at life, whether that's staying put, transferring, whether that's starting or sitting, whether that's playing or redshirting, whatever it is, like, we're going to support and we're all about if it's ultimately going to lead to them winning at life. And that's, I think, what the bottom line of our conversation we just had is let's make sure we're putting education pieces and regulation pieces in place, not to hinder the athlete, but to help ensure that the decisions they're making as 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old young people are setting themselves up to be winners in life. And like, I mean, and what I mean, like, by winner, not like, oh yeah, they have this worldly. No, I'm saying like they have peace, joy. They have, mental, emotional, spiritual strength, and joy, like those aspects of life that a lot of former athletes just flat out don't have. And it can all go back to a decision they made when they were in college. But that's the Blue Bloods College Game Time podcast for you right there.
Well, once again, man, thanks for joining. Thanks for streaming. Especially, I forgot who it is who sent us a DM, said he streamed every last one of our shows. Man, I forget his name.
Yes, bro, I saw it. I think it was like something your mama or something.
You know who you are, man. Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't remember your name. My apologies. Thank you, man. Shout out to I always got to give them some love. Our Nebraska and Arkansas faithful, man. They're really helping us build this thing. We made it. We're going to come to some games this year. I really want to come to the Nebraska OU game. I think, Trey, you had an Arkansas game you really wanted to go to this year. And we Arkansas Ole Miss. We're going to find a way to be there, have like a live meet and greet. I don't know. We're going to figure it out, but we're going to do it this year. But, man, any closing remarks before I do my deal?
Yes. We don't have time, and maybe we'll revisit this next week, depending on how this upcoming week plays out. But when Ole Miss backed up the Brinks truck to extend Lane Kiffin, if you go back and find that episode or find the video, it would have been the episode of the weekend when he signed his extension or agreed to the extension. I can't remember if that was late November or early December. I specifically said my response to that is exactly what's happening at Ole Miss right now. I'm going to leave it at that. There's your teaser.
Well, hey, we'll have to revisit that. Now we got a great episode coming next week because we have a bunch of stuff we didn't get to, but full episode for you. But once again, thank you for joining us, man. Follow us on our Twitter handles below. I'm trying to get better. I had a guy hit me on Twitter like, "Hey, man, love your stuff. Sometimes you have a couple gaffes. You're talking too fast." So trying to slow down, and I appreciate the thank you for the feedback, man. We're not professionals, but we're trying to become them. So thank you. Thank you guys for that. We're fans. But follow us here on Twitter, man. Make sure you guys keep supporting, hit the subscribe button, share with your friends. Man, we appreciate you guys who do share our stuff, and we see it on Facebook and all that and on Twitter. And hope you guys have a great weekend. For college basketball fans, enjoy your wins if your team won this week. They lost, resting your laurels, and until next week, peace.